So, ladies and gentlemen, interesting turn of events. Let's make sure this is all working. Yes, sir. So, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. ADP. So, we've had a nice little shock reading from the marketplace. Trump has hit Truth Social and said to Powell, it's too late. What are we going to do? Today's live, guys, we're going to break it all down because something isn't adding up, to say the least. You've got lots of people buying Bitcoin. At the same time, you've got a supply shock on exchanges. And then you've got Bitcoin profit taking. And there's lots of things happening in crypto right now. But the bane of the marketplace is this story about where we're going to be with the interest rates. And data that's been coming out has been conflicting the idea of even actually cutting these rates. Let's break it all down and understand exactly what's going on. And I'm going to explain to you exactly what I think is happening. But let's just present all the facts and bits of data and all that madness. And let's see how the market today is going to react, because it's looking like an absolute anyways. Let's get with it. So, futures hold gains after jobs-driven advance. Yeah, that was yesterday's logic, okay? That's what caused the market to make a move to the upside. But then when we go into today's data, you can see that the ADP non-farm came in at a despicable 37K jobs. That is absolutely frightening. So what is that telling you? It's telling you that the work's not really there. And as I said to you all on Monday, look, the trends in the data, it's just not there to grant the idea of the Fed cutting the rates. We go over to the Fed watch and we can see 98.7% is where investors are at on keeping the rates high. Well, Trump comes out and says, ADP number out. Too late. Powell must now lower the rate. He is unbelievable. Europe has lowered the rates 9 times, which explains why the euro's making a pump to the upside. Not to forget the fact that you're getting significant results on the yields on the euro. What is going on here? Here we go. Let's just have a look at where we are with the euro and the yen, of course. We've got NASDAQ stalling at the VWAP. NASDAQ traders, keep an eye out on that. 12.59% on the euro and 27.07% on the yen. So we can safely assume that there's dominance towards euro right now. Going over to the NASDAQ, you can see it's made that little sweep to the downside. It was interesting because it took out yesterday's high and over here earlier on this morning, and then it's come back down, swept that high once again, and then it's just made a significant reversal to the downside. Now, quickly going over to the dollar dominance to put it into perspective, you can see this is just wild activity, and it was not a reading they expected. They were expecting 111,000, okay? The JOLTS job openings report came in at 7.39. That naturally encouraged yesterday's price action across the board, where you saw NASDAQ just flying up, and then it was tech-driven as well, suggesting that, okay, if there's more people working, then that means companies are getting the work. So that means if they're getting the work, they're selling a product, people are there for them to work for it. And then, of course, shareholders are happy with everything. But looking at the way things are right now, it's not looking good, ladies and gentlemen. Just quickly go back into it. The NASDAQ took a sweep to the downside. The bond market is actually doing very well. It's trading up 0.35%. Investors are trying to lock in yields. And listen, this is something you've got to take into consideration. Just because Trump has said this, certain investors are going to be like, okay, Powell's going to reduce the rates. Not at all, because he did say that he's not going to do anything that's going to be politically motivated. Speaking of politics, Trump slams Senator Rand for opposing his big, beautiful bill due to $5 trillion debt ceiling hike. Well, remember when Bessent said that we're going to increase the debt ceiling? And, you know, of course, this is going to be a problem, and Trump wants to cut the taxes. And that's just going to send the deficit even further up. Now, look, this is why Jerome Powell is probably not cutting the rates just yet. So I was looking for meme coins, and I found this meme coin, which happens to be the US debt, okay? It's labeled as US debt, so go and find that meme coin and get involved, ladies and gentlemen. Jokes aside, this is the US national debt, 36.21 trillion. What an absolute diabolical situation, okay? You want to cut taxes now. This is why Powell isn't really cutting the interest rates right now, because of this. Well, Trump, man, you encourage the idea of tariffs. You're saying that China is hard to make a deal with. What, you thought that China was just going to roll over and be like, yeah, no worries, we'll take your deal. We're not like, they're not like India or Brazil. Even the Eurozone's like being a little bit difficult for Donald Trump. So you've now got this stalemate with regards to deals, even though today they said that it was actually going to be something that actually should be concluded in terms of trade deals. Today's a deadline for some. But with this national debt hitting massive record highs, with Trump wanting to increase or cut taxes, it's going to send it up even more. So that's naturally going to put pressure on Jerome Powell. Thinking about it, mortgage demand drops for the third straight week, even as interest rates ease. So this is slowing economy, ladies and gentlemen. It's slowing down, okay? And the next week's reading on the CPI is going to really put things into perspective. Now, if it's all tech-driven per se, then this isn't good news. Apple gets a rare downgrade. Wow. Apparently, it's too expensive to buy Apple right now. Quickly going over to Apple. Just go and have a look at that bad boy. Here we go. Apple share price right now has gapped down at the open at $202. Was trading last night at 203. Didn't really make that much of a significant move up to the upside. Well, yeah, yesterday it did, but didn't quite do that much flavor, if I'm quite frank with you. Quickly going over into NVIDIA right now, just as the open comes into play. NVIDIA's holding on to its gains very well, so close to its all-time high. And I think that a lot of players are just trying to get involved and sell as much stock as they can if things are going for better, for worse. Now, with that being said, just going to put something into perspective for you. So getting into crypto, just have a look at Bitcoin right now. You can see Bitcoin has made a little bit of a flavorsome move to the downside. Let me just get rid of certain things on here. There we go. It's made a move to the downside, and it's taken the Asian session high to then start going and work towards the psychological ranges. Now, this is what my story is about cryptocurrency effectively not adding up. So let me just put things into perspective. Have you seen this guy, Jacob King? All right, he's come out with this. He's got a relatively decent amount of followers, and he's come up with this idea that crypto or Bitcoin, it's fraud, it's a farce. Okay, so just he's talking about Tether has mysteriously transferred 37,229 Bitcoin, nearly 4 billion to Jack Mallers' firm 21 Capital. Have you seen that website? Where is it? Here we go. That's the website right there. Scroll down. There you go. That's it. 21 million. It's just 21. Sorry. So that's it. It's a treasury. That's what they're trying to do. Okay. But if you go into it and have a look, he talks about, he says, in the thread, he goes in and says that Bitcoin is just going to end up going in the bin anyway. We can't be bearish in that sense. But in good news, we've got this. Check this out. So Bitcoin price forecast, it could hit 100K as profit taking reaches record levels. Now, this is the image that suggests record profit taking. Look, top side right there. Lots of activity. Okay. 30,000 Bitcoin bought in 4 days. New Bitcoin bull run incoming. All right. Going into the ETF, balance has gone down because BlackRock has effectively sold a little bit of Bitcoin. Okay. But nothing to be worried about. I mean, going into today, we've got nothing much. Grace not really putting in anything into the Coinbase deposit, but it's nothing to be too concerned about. Of course, it's at an all-time high in terms of the balance. So naturally, you're going to think, hold on a second, some profit taking is going to come into play. But this logic here does make sense. How there is going to be profit taking. And of course, dormant wallet activity is starting to rise, which means that there's guys who've been holding Bitcoin for such a long time. They've come and had a look and they thought, oh, wow, I bought this Bitcoin when it was $5. Now it's nearly 105 and I currently own 3,000 Bitcoin. So they're probably doing something about it and taking some profits. Now, when we actually break it all down and look at Bitcoin price action, you can see that on the higher time frames, you've got this interesting story that Bitcoin is so far pulling away from the 5 and 13 EMA, and it hasn't yet successfully closed above the 5 and 13 EMA, as you can see right here. That is a problem for us, because if it can't close above these moving averages, then momentum isn't there for it to pick up so it can start sustaining itself to the upside. Quickly going over to other assets, you've got Ethereum, which has pretty much had the day off. Well, it keeps on having days off because it's not going anywhere. Some would call it accumulation. Quickly going into Bitcoin dominance, we can see Bitcoin dominance still holding out at the 64 region. I'm still expecting the 65 highs to come into play. Then you've got Solana in principle, just really not really doing too much. Been very, very choppy trading Solana. And we go into it, you can see you've got this green vector candle region right here that could pose as a point of interest for it. USDT dominance, lots of activity happening with this area here. And if we look at it historically, where USDT was transacted at before, when in the sense where traders were exchanging Bitcoin to USDT, this is the initial reaction that you got from it. And we are now in that zone. And then when we look at everything, we can see, okay, is there a possibility that traders are going to be consolidating their positions in Bitcoin and start heading back up? And then, of course, the ratio increases. So what we've got to look at this and say is, all right, we've come back into a previous area where it activated investor sentiment to start selling Bitcoin. And you can see that it's respected this range so far, so good. Okay. So the idea is that if prices of crypto are going to come down, USDT investors as such are going to be exchanging Bitcoin back into USDT to get into some safe havens. Of course, with the data that's come out today, given that it is 37,000, we've got the ISM PMI coming out, and that is projected to come in at 52. This will really put things into perspective, because if the services data comes out and shows that everything is all good, then the ADP right there could just be deemed as an anomaly. That's the problem. Fed will literally say, yeah, it was probably because there was a slowdown with all the tariff changes. Like when the tariffs were put in, companies were starting to adjust. And then, of course, when then Trump says, here's an extension, they then started to adjust again. So that could be something that they talk about. But if the ISM comes out shortly at 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard, 52 reading would be all good for Jerome Powell, and comments like this from Trump would be deemed irrelevant. Okay. So what's not adding up for me, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that we've got so much Bitcoin buying. Okay. And yeah, there's activity on the chain, which is suggesting they're taking profits. So why aren't Bitcoin going up, you say? Well, that's because they're still accumulating it. And you've got to get into accumulation before you can go and distribute and start selling. Going into the order flow, you can see over here, well, Nasdaq's not doing anything. You can see over here that the book itself is very light. There's nothing going on. And this is something that you've got to take into consideration. I'm going to give you something here which will help you understand whether or not now is a good time, or to determine if your day is going to be worth trading or not. Okay. So let's say you look at the book and you see that you've got liquidity over here and you've got liquidity down here. We usually can see that when there's a lot of liquidity, it usually plants itself. So you can look at this area here, all right? You've got 37 million sold to be sold at 107. We've got 38 million right there, 107,200, 32 million at 107,300. Then you've got another 32 million to be sold at 107,600. So it's safe to say that that is an iceberg order. So someone's plowing in Bitcoin orders to be sold, okay? What that could lead to is it could lead to some sharp movements up, and then price comes down again. Similar to what we saw yesterday in the chart with Bitcoin. If you notice, in the New York session, they came up and sold it, and then they instantly brought price back down again. Well, not instantly, but it rolled over several hours, okay? And the way you can work out if the day is going to be good with volume or not is when you look at this program here and say, all right, I don't have that much liquidity here, and there's not that much liquidity there. What will the market more than likely do? Well, you got to look at it like this. Sometimes price action will consolidate. Then out of nowhere, if you get a burst of volume, okay, and it goes in whatever direction, if there's no real volume behind the move, you are improving the odds of it actually coming back down again, because it's a massive imbalance and the volume's not there. So they're going to bring it straight back to the zone that they moved it from. Now, all you want to do is go back in the charts and look at where there were instances that actually happened, okay? So look, I'm assuming that on this day, on Sunday, that was a good day because Trump was extending the tariffs and what have you, and Bitcoin started to climb up, and it did relatively well. It didn't recover it straight away, okay? Then you've got this here. It makes a nice move to the upside, and it was more than likely done on light volume, and then they brought it all the way back down again, and that was Wednesday. So that was, I think that was the FOMC, not the FOMC, I think it was. I think it was on the FOMC, if I'm correct, or it was just a news announcement where liquidity wasn't as big, which is equally a move up and then a move back down again, okay? So when you get the idea that the day doesn't really have the volume to back it, the story then goes on to say that you are effectively going to be trading back into the same zones that price had moved from. Okay. When you get good days where volume is coming in, that's when you see these nice climbs and there's no obstruction to it. It just moves up really nicely. Okay. So that was an example of it from yesterday where we saw a nice pump up and then it just rolls back down again. Okay. Now, any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Thoughts on gold? Listen, the idea of gold right now, guys, is pretty interesting, okay? Because the news announcements that's just come out has sent gold down to send it back up again, but gold isn't really making a move, okay? Gold investors will be paying attention to this comment by Trump, but he's not going to be able to manipulate Powell into actually cutting the rates at all. Why? Because naturally, when the rates do cut, gold's price goes up. However, when the debt keeps going up, which is what Trump's trying to effectively achieve with this bill, okay, when that goes up, gold's price will most definitely go up. It will most definitely go up. Because if I look at it right here, do I have it? Wait a second. Let me just bring that up. US debt in relation to gold. Let me bring that up for you. Whilst we're at it, how many in the live stream today? Okay, 1,400 of you. Where's the likes on the lives, ladies and gents? Where are you? Here you go. So anytime, if you're a gold player, okay, this is here. This right here is the GDP of public debt. Okay. So it's going up. All right. Equally, gold's price goes up. Okay. Now the blue or the light blue right here is the deficit. So the deficit's getting worse. Okay. Even though it's come down ever so slightly for every dollar that the US earns, okay, it owes 120.81% on top. So you can appreciate that the US is in a little bit of a tricky situation. It says here that the US economy is a Ponzi scheme, says Max Kaiser in $2.2 million Bitcoin prediction. So yeah, of course it's a Ponzi scheme because it's still going up, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of going up, mad love to Bryony. I mean, come on, bro. Please fix this image. Fix it for me, man. You know, it's not fair. But that's what I probably look like if I was to stay. Actually, no, I'll be looking much more fresher than that if I were to actually be part of the Federal Reserve. That's one thing. Ooh, NASDAQ's just done some flavor. So yeah, if you like that, ladies and gentlemen, mad props to Bryony for making me look like a right anyways. So yeah, that's the logic right here, ladies and gentlemen, that as long as this keeps going up and the deficit keeps on being negative, gold's price will continue to go up, which makes sense why Goldman Sachs wants it to get to around $4,500 on the price of gold. Okay. Now, how to determine if it's high volume though. So here's an example. Of course, this is based on orders that are coming into the market. And depending on what software platforms you're using, it's all going to be relative, okay? But as a representation of the volume that is present in the book as commitment, so resting orders, you can assume that if you've got high resting orders and lots of them, okay, in other words, if these here are kind of dark, then that would then suggest, or bright pink, something like this, then that would suggest that there is volume coming in and the market's going to end up transacting in those areas at some point, okay? But the faster they move up, equally, unless it's done on very, very, very good news, if you get a move to the upside in any asset and there's no news, it can instantly then bring it back down again. NASDAQ did it last week, okay? It slumped to the downside before the NVIDIA news announcements and then instantly made a reversal back up. And that was before the news announcements. And that was actually 2 hours before the news announcements as well. Excuse me. So back into why Bitcoin is going. It's not really going down. To be honest with you guys, let me explain something. If you haven't done so already, go to the Traders Reality website and take the free course on the psychological levels. Okay. Of course, it's going to stay dark right now. It's not going to move, but never mind. Okay, so yeah, go to courses, click that, and do the breaking down the hybrid system course. Okay, do the free course, and it talks about the psychological levels. And what you've got, and you get a PDF, by the way, when you go onto the Traders Reality website, it's free of charge. Just download that PDF. It shows you everything you need about the hybrid system. And this is the system that we use. Now, the hybrid system, the psychological levels takes the first high and first low at the start of every trading week. And what you can see here is Bitcoin has just been stuck at that point. Okay. Now it's good for anyone that is trading Bitcoin. If you want to take advantage of price going to and from these certain levels right here, But it's very significant because it takes a first high, first low at the start of the trading week, and you can see how price respects these ranges. So the logic says that they seem to sell above the psychological ranges. Equally, they do buy from below the psychological ranges. And when you've got Bitcoin stuck in this range, and then you've got the NASDAQ making significant moves up and down, okay, you're then trying to work out, why isn't Bitcoin moving alongside the NASDAQ? Why not? Like, what's going on? And in my honest opinion, I think investors are just rushing to try and sell as much stock as possible, because this time bomb right here and these orders that he wants to try and get past, and it's already breaking down with Apple losing its grade, it's kind of putting things into perspective that we might end up seeing this dead cat bounce starting to break down. Because when you look at it overall, guys, the daily time frame, it does give you the logic that, yeah, things are looking good. And you still got these red vectors up here. What a perfect place to try and sell as much as you can when it makes that high. Because if you go back to the last time when the NASDAQ made these sort of moves, if we go over to the idea of this high over here, when you look at this area, this was when the war got started and the US-Ukraine story, Russia-Ukraine story. Russia is actually waiting for the US and the UK to react to what's been going on with Ukraine. Okay, it's waiting for them to react to it. So it's like, hold on a second. Are we gonna retaliate? Or are we just gonna wait and see what US and Ukraine, UK have to say about it? So it's like Russia has got pretty much is stuck and it can't do what it really wants to do. And Ukraine is just being given free roam to do whatever it wants. Okay, that creates tensions. And when I look at it, we're starting to see that logic coming into play. Because if we look at this time over here, when we got into the war with Russia and Ukraine, it was at all-time highs, okay? And then you've got the same story coming into action where you've got fast move down, fast move back up. To be honest with you, this is a bearish market, a nice correction, okay? This is not a correction. This is like a flash crash. So as long as the market gets what it wants, the market will sustain this rally higher. But if it doesn't, then we're going to have ourselves a very interesting mark to the downside at some point. Because when's it going to blow? And they just keep increasing the debt ceiling. It's just another rally to the upside until it actually gets to a point where they can't do anything about it. That's my logic, ladies and gentlemen. Look, I've got no vectors on this rally to the upside. That is wild. There's no vectors and volume is significantly low. So let's just go into it. What's going on here? I'm keeping an eye on that bad boy. Let's just go over to the NASDAQ just to look at the volume from yesterday. Look, yesterday's rally to the upside was not done on good institutional backing. That's a problem. Because if the volume's not coming in, look on the bottom right here. If volume's not coming in, then this is just another example of volatility. You need volume to be above the daily average, the 50-day average, and it's not. So that tells me institutional investors are not buying into this. If anything, they are selling. Just to put it into perspective, let's have a look at where we are with smart money right now. So some money is pretty optimistic. So everybody and their friend is buying up stocks right now, and that is at the extreme right here of 0.66. And smart money down here is effectively as it's going lower, because we've been expecting this to come down and it hasn't hit an extreme just yet. I do believe that once this hits an extreme, that would be then the turn of the market. So once this potentially gets down towards these levels at around, yeah, maybe down here to around the 0.3 mark, then that would then suggest that smart money has done enough selling. The market's topped out. It's hit the all-time highs, and then it reverses aggressively from that point, which would then justify the logic of me saying that what's going on up here with the drop to the downside is in principle something similar to this story here. And I know a lot of you have been talking about the unrealized losses for the banks and what have you. Well, if the interest rates are still high, okay, that means it's getting harder and harder and more costly to borrow US dollars. And we haven't had those stresses yet from banks. All right. And as long as banks are still operating and turning over profit, then the Fed doesn't need to be too concerned about anything yet. It's just relying on data, and it gets boring. But I'll be frank with you. If we actually go and look at it, non-farm payrolls is going to be the reading that changes it all this week. This coming in negative, not really fussed about it. Okay. but it's the non-farm payrolls. This is the true representation of the labor market, guys. And if this comes in at a lower reading of 132,000 or even lower than what it's projected, then that will then give us the idea that the Federal Reserve will need to cut the interest rates. It will need to act fast. We will get an emergency meeting, and then the markets would price in the idea of the rate cuts coming into play. Capish? Cool. Quickly go back to Bitcoin, have a look at where you are at there. Okay. Back check the last moons, you might be surprised. Yeah, the moon story. I get that. Wondering, waiting on what Trump is going to say next. Well, Trump today must be saying something about this story with the ADP. Must be saying something. Today, what have we got? Oh, we got activity. Here we go. Markets open. So he is closed press. He receives his intelligence briefing and signs proclamations. And okay, yeah. So we're going to have Trump speaking today. Trump is going to be talking. So just be very, very careful when you are all trading with Bitcoin and everything across the board. NASDAQ is just behaving like a nut job. I just joined this. You joined the Platinum membership this month. I need help on what strategy I should focus on in the masterclasses. Thanks. I've gone through the PDFs. Quite frankly, if you've just joined the Platinum membership, the first thing you want to do is just get a feel for the Discord, because the Discord is where you're going to see everybody exchanging ideas on the hybrid system. But you need to identify what kind of trader you are. If you're a swing trader or a scalper, then once you identify what you are, then the strategies behind the hybrid system will guide you into trading in that way. So if you're a scalper, then of course you're going to be paying attention to the V-shaped reversals. You're going to be paying attention to the block trade principle. There's a lot of stuff in there, but get into the Discord if you're not there already and check that all out. Okay? Wicked. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, hope that helps you. All right, please trade safely, and I'll be checking in with you all tonight. Hit the like button and subscribe on the way out if you've enjoyed today's flavor. Peace.